Hello, welcome to the next installment in the Bentley Little series. This is the Disappearance from 2010. There's the cover art, which not a lot to say about it. It's appropriate for the novel because it hints that this is more of a mystery than a horror novel. It's a silhouette figure on what looks like a desert road in a desert landscape. Yeah, it suits the story. I don't know who did the cover art. It doesn't say. It comes in at 390 pages, and here's the back, which sounds intriguing. It says the festival was intended as a getaway from UCLA for Gary, his girlfriend Joan, and their friends. But soon after they arrive, Joan vanishes. Calls to her parents' home yield only dead air. Her school records are gone, and there is no evidence that Joan or even her roommate ever existed. Most disturbing of all is what they do find. Among Joan's belongings is a prayer written on a small scroll. It's a safeguard and a warning from something called the Outsiders. For Gary and his friends, it's the only clue. Now, if they want to find out exactly what happened to Joan, they must follow it, but they may not like where it leads. Yeah, so that sounds really intriguing. This book, even by the standards of Bentley Little Books, is a very highly criticized one. A lot of people rename this The Disappointment. And the reason they do that is because the setup is fantastic. This book is divided into three parts, and part one takes up almost exactly half of the book. And part one is some of the best stuff he's ever written. And even this book's biggest critics agree on that it starts fantastically. The main criticism of this book is that it turns out to be a letdown, people think, because you think it's going to be some kind of mind-blowingly creative and imaginative supernatural thing, but it turns out to be a very basic, straightforward story about a cult in the desert, which just kidnaps this girl because she used to be a member of the cult. It is probably Bentley Little's most simple idea, his most basic idea. And what I'm going to do in this review is I'm going to begin by going through all of the criticisms of it, criticisms that I agree with, but then I'm going to end by saying why I nevertheless like this book a lot. All right, the story is, like it said there, this group of UCLA college students, about 21 years old, they go to this Burning Man festival in the desert. I'd never heard of Burning Man, but apparently it's a real thing. It's got its Wikipedia page, sounds pretty intriguing. They go there. When they're there, they suffer some kind of hallucinatory episode. It looks like they've been drugged. And when they come to, one of their group has disappeared, Joan, the girlfriend of Gary. And when they look around for her, she's nowhere to be found. Finally, they give up and go back to the college campus to take up the investigation there. And it turns out that Joan has completely vanished off the face of the earth. All of her university records are gone. It's like she was never there. All of her social media accounts have been shut down and taken off. The driving license records are gone. So basically, it's like she just had never existed. And this is why I think a lot of people ended up being massively disappointed, because it seems like whatever has happened to her is something epic, something huge. But it turns out that all that's happened to her is that when she was born into a cult in the California desert, and her family escaped it when she was a young girl, and now all these years later, they've come back for her. The problem with this book, which a lot of people have, is that the cult is really underdeveloped. No idea what it is, what it wants, what it believes in. It's just this group of people who worship this character called Father, this 90-year-old guy who is without any kind of character. He's uninspiring, he's uninspirational, but for some weird reason, he's managed to convince all these people to just worship him, and apparently that's all this cult does. They don't have an ideology, they don't have some kind of philosophy, there's no end goal for any of this. I mean, cults usually, they believe in at some time in the future, some events will happen and they'll all be raptured away, but there's nothing to suggest that they believe any of that. It's just these people who live in the desert. They live like the Amish. They reject technology. They wear primitive clothes. They do a bit of work in the fields. They eat every once in a while, go to bed, wake up, and just worship this old guy. So the cult is very underwhelming and not the slightest bit threatening. There's nothing there's no reason to be afraid of these people, because I was thinking, when I was reading about what these people do, I was thinking, sign me up. It sounds like a pretty idyllic lifestyle that they have here. What's threatening about it? Other than if you do decide to leave, then they will try and kill you. But um, why would you want to leave? I kept thinking, what's so bad about this? Yeah, the same problem I had. Remember when I reviewed, if you saw it, my Richard Lehman novel, Beware? The same thing there. There was a cult. That all ended up being about a cult, but it was no idea what they were actually doing. Why? What did they believe in? Um, yeah, so, all right, that's criticism number one. There's no indication of what this cult is, and therefore they're just not threatening at all. Criticism number two of this book is that even though it's very basic and straightforward, it still manages to be very far-fetched. These cult members, they just kill people in broad daylight, like in plain sight. There's one episode where they walk onto the university campus and butcher somebody in a corridor between classes. Like, there's students all over the place, and these people just walk in. Or because they're all dressed really oddly, like I said, like the army. So you would think they would stand out. One guy's got a huge whip, and he's just whipping around. Imagine you're on a university campus in the middle of the summer, and there's like this group of weird Amish-looking people walking through with bayonets and whips and various other bladed weapons. I think it would catch your eye, but apparently it doesn't in this. So that's all kinds of just Bentley littleisms where bizarre stuff will happen, and you just got to suspend your disbelief and just go with the flow. At the end of this book, he does what he usually does. Page 358, I think it is. Yeah, Bentley Little will often do this. He'll get himself out of jail with the improbability of it all. One of the characters here, Stacy, where my finger is, she's just summed up all the why none of this makes any kind of sense, why it's so illogical. She says that it doesn't add up, and then it continues. She was right, Gary thought, and yet how much of what had happened to them made any kind of logical sense? From Joan's mysterious disappearance at Burning Man, to her roommate's Kara's conversion, to his own abduction, to the home with its deformed, incestuous offspring, everything that had occurred had followed an absurdly irrational rationale. Were they now going to start applying the test of ordinary reason to a situation that, until this very second, had been its polar opposite? You see, yeah, I've mentioned this before. He will often do that, Bentley Little. He'll write himself a passage at the end which basically says, don't think too much about it. The world is a strange place. Everything is illogical. He'll coin oxymorons like this, irrational rationale, which, if you think about it, doesn't mean anything. At least it's contradictory. I know oxymoron by nature is contradictory, but what I mean is it's empty. It's meaningless. And I don't think that's necessary with Bentley Little. He is noted for his habit of just throwing in very bizarre, surreal stuff that makes no sense. It's what his fans like about him. I wish he didn't feel he had to keep writing the same passage in all of his books, saying, the world is a crazy, strange place. We can't explain everything, so don't think too hard about the plot holes. You don't need to do that, Bentley. Trust me, you don't. We don't mind it that you do it. It's why we go to you for this. Again, Bentley Little, he has this very small box of tricks. And he's exceptional at everything in that box, turning the mundane into the creepy, throwing in these utterly bizarre, surreal moments that just take you totally by surprise. He's superb at that. But outside of that box of tricks, he's not all that good. Things like characterization and, great original imagination, that's not in him. And I don't mind it that it's not in him. I like it very much when he sticks to what he's good at. So, yeah, I think I've covered the main criticisms of this book. Number one, it turns out to be a big letdown because it sounds like it's going to be... just one other thing about the improbability of all of this. So, yeah, this cult, they live very primitively. They reject technology, they live on a compound in the desert, and just very, very primitive living. But apparently they're also technological wizards. They're able to hack into any government database you want and just delete people's existence from it. Stuff like that doesn't make any sense at all. And Stacy at the end notes that as well, but Bentley Little replies through the voice of Gary by saying, don't think about it too much. Life's a strange thing. And yeah, life is a very strange thing. I agree with that, but it's not so strange that Amish people with whips and chains can wander onto a college campus in broad daylight and just butcher people, So But despite everything I've just said, I enjoyed this because after the debacle of the house, the previous Bentley Little book I reviewed, where reading that was a chore, it was hard work, turning the pages was a major effort. This was never like that. It's so readable, especially the first part. Like I said, part one is some of the most gripping stuff he's ever written. And I didn't mind part two and part three. Part two is where they've got Joan back and she's in the back with the cult. And I liked that part. And then they escape again. And part three is where Father and some of his minions are still around and they try to get her back again. That, by the way, that's another issue a lot of people have with this story, is that why is Father going to these lengths to get Joan? Why now after all these years? There doesn't seem to be anything particularly special about her. He's created this massive cult which spans all of the USA apparently, and they're so advanced that they're able to hack into government records. And he's going to jeopardize all of this just to get back some 21-year-old woman. And apparently the only reason he wants her is just to have a baby with her. He's already got thousands of babies with other cult members, but he just, for some reason, he wants the one that got away. A bit weird. But yeah, anyway, so part three is when is the big final showdown. There's about 20 showdowns in this book, but that's the last one. And it peters out, it runs out of steam, but I never wanted to stop reading. One of the reasons I like this book is because it's intriguing for me to see what Bentley Little does with a simple idea. Sometimes he can overreach himself, and books like The House or The Town, I've not reviewed The Town, but it's similar to The House, where it's a big mess because it's like he was trying to be very imaginative, but it's just not in him to do that, in my opinion. So The Disappearance, he strips it way back. He's just told the simplest story of his career. It's really basic. There are almost, once you get beyond part one, there's no twists and turns. There are no real surprises. And I didn't mind it at all. I was glad to have a simple, well-told story. Maybe my view of this is colored by the fact that I read this immediately after The House. So, this was like a drink of water after that. But I don't think all that much it's influenced by The House. I do think that if I'd read this at any point, I would have had the same reaction, which is that I enjoyed it a lot. You might not. You might find it boring. A lot of people do. But it did it for me. I had a very good time with this. So well done, Bentley Little, for that. And thank you for it. So The Disappearance from 2010. I've been reading a lot recently, but I haven't been able to make videos for various reasons. But so immediately after this, I'm going to upload my second video of the day, which is going to double up, I think, as a kind of mini rant. So stick around for that. Thanks for watching this one, and I'll talk to you very soon. Take care of yourselves, and bye for now.